When I came back from a 6-month business trip abroad, I found myself locked out by the new smart lock on my own front door. And there was a brand new accessibility ramp built right next to the front steps. Confused, I waited, and the person who opened the door turned out to be my wife's first love. Turns out she'd taken him in to care for him after a car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. And I'd been divorced without even knowing it. Now they're legally married, living it up in my house. I was just about to blow up, but what my wife said next made me calm down instantly. Feeling guilty about what she'd done, my genius investor wife had walked away with almost nothing. Aside from this villa, she'd left all the family money to me. And she had more than enough money of her own to buy dozens of villas just like this. Well, what was there to say? Of course I understood her saintly little heart. Though, looking at my wife now, married to someone else on paper, why did she feel more alluring than she used to? 6 months apart. Time to reclaim what's mine. ... When I finally set foot in Sioux City, the bright sunlight hitting my face made me feel a little dazed. I'd spent way too long in London's endless rain and gloom, and it was starting to drive me crazy. This 6-month posting had drained every last bit of energy I had. But at least the results were good. The company gave me 2 options: stay at headquarters back home for a small promotion, or take over as regional president at the overseas branch with double the salary. I planned to talk it over with Shenji first. We'd been married for 5 years after all. If I took the overseas job, we'd be apart more than we'd be together again. If she didn't want that, I could stay home. Even if it slowed down my career, at least I'd be there with her. I was in my 30s now. It was about time we had a kid. I dragged my suitcase behind me, still clutching the limited edition bracelet I'd bought her in London, and stopped in front of our small villa on the outskirts of Sioux City. But when I reached out to scan my fingerprint on the lock out of habit, I froze. The old combination lock had been replaced with the latest smart facial recognition model. On top of that, a brand new accessibility ramp had been built next to the front steps. I frowned. A ramp? We didn't have any elderly people in the house. Why install one? I stood there and leaned in to line my face up with the sensor. Recognition failed. Please try again. A cold, mechanical female voice rang out. I stepped back and double-checked the house number. No mistake. This was the right place. Maybe Shenji had swapped out the old lock for a safer one while I was abroad, and hadn't had a chance to add my face since I wasn't home. I pulled out my phone and called Shenji. It rang for a long time before she picked up. Hello, silly. Shenji's voice sounded flustered, and I could faintly hear the sound of a wheelchair rolling in the background. I just got off the plane. I'm at the front door, I said gently. Can you let me in? I can't get the lock to work. An eerie silence fell over the other end of the line. After several long seconds, Shenji took a deep breath, her voice a little shaky. You're back early? I thought you weren't coming until next week. The project wrapped up ahead of schedule. Wanted to surprise you, I said with a smile. What, not happy to see me? No, it's not that. Just wait a second. I'll be right there to open the door. She hung up in a hurry. A minute or so later, the lock clicked open. I pushed the door open and dragged my suitcase inside. But when I looked up and took in the full view of the living room, I froze on the spot. Was this still my house? The minimalist, cool-toned interior I'd loved so much had been completely redone, unrecognizable. The tall coffee table had been replaced with a low, soft-edged one. Every piece of furniture with sharp corners was lined with foam bumpers. Where our wedding photo used to hang on the wall, there was now a bold, colorful abstract painting instead. Even the rug by the front door had been swapped out for a rough, non-slip material. This wasn't my taste at all. It wasn't even Shenji's style. I stood in the entryway frowning, that sinking, uneasy feeling in my chest growing heavier by the second. Just then, a soft rolling sound echoed from down the hallway. A middle-aged woman in a caregiver's uniform pushed a wheelchair slowly out of the guest bedroom. Seated in the wheelchair was a man. He wore loose loungewear, his legs resting limply on the footrests. I knew that face. Ju Chung, Shenji's first love, the guy she'd dated for a few months back in college. When he saw me, he paused for a split second. Then a faint, taunting smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Mr. Chin, you're finally back. Ju Cheng's voice was a little hoarse. He laced his hands together in his lap, carrying himself like he owned the place. GE is in the kitchen cutting up fruit for you. If it weren't for this house while you were gone these past 6 months, I don't know how I would have gotten through all this with my legs. I stood there staring at Ju Cheng in the wheelchair, then at the house, altered beyond all recognition. Finally, my gaze landed on Shen Ji as she walked out of the kitchen, her face as pale as paper. A wave of utter absurdity washed over me. I'd watched a few cheesy melodramas in my spare time, sure, but they'd always just been entertainment to me. I'd always thought all that stuff about the one that got away, first loves, unresolved feelings. It all meant nothing next to the real, everyday grind of life. In the adult world, who really throws everything away for love? But now, it seemed like maybe that wasn't true. Was the whole world just one giant melodrama? How else could my wife of 5 years have moved another man into our house right out in the open? The whole thing was so ridiculous that I almost forgot to be angry. All I felt was speechless. When you're that dumbfounded, sometimes you just have to laugh. I dragged my suitcase into the living room and sat down on the sofa. Go on, explain. I looked at Shen Ji, my voice so cold it even sounded strange to my own ears. Shen Ji glanced at me, then at Ju Cheng in the wheelchair. Maybe she was worried having him here would upset me. Or maybe she was afraid my questions would embarrass him. She turned to the caregiver and said, Sister Wang, it's nice and sunny outside today. Why don't you push Ju Cheng out to the backyard for some fresh air? Ju Cheng gave me a long, hard look, the corner of his mouth twitching like he wanted to say something. In the end, he said nothing and let the caregiver wheel him out. The living room was just Shen Ji and me now. She stood about 2 meters away from me, like a child who'd done something wrong but still thought she had a good reason. Her eyes welled up with tears instantly. Then, in a tiny voice that reeked of self-righteous martyrdom, she told me everything that had happened these past 6 months. As she spoke, I learned the truth. We were already divorced. Not only that, she'd married Ju Cheng a month ago. Silly, I'm sorry. I really had no choice. Shen Ji buried her face in her hands, sobbing prettily. Like she was the one who'd been wronged, the poor victim in all this. He was in the hospital, so miserable he tried to kill himself multiple times, yanking out his 4 tubes. His mother came to me, got on her knees, begged me to save him. He's disabled now. He has nothing left. I couldn't just stand by and watch him die. I sat on the sofa, taking slow, deep breaths. So you got us divorced without even telling me? I stared at her, disbelieving. How did you even manage that? Shen Ji bit her lip, unable to meet my eyes. You were in London with the time difference and you were gone so long. Hearing that, it all clicked. 2 months ago, in the middle of the night, I'd just pulled back-to-back all-nighters and barely fallen asleep when she called. She'd sent over a few digital documents. Said they were some kind of family survey and asset confirmation forms, and that they needed my signature urgently. Half asleep, trusting my wife completely, I'd signed them without reading them carefully, even did the facial verification to go with it. Turns out they hadn't been survey forms at all. They'd been a divorce agreement, carefully planned out by her. I looked at the woman I'd shared a bed with for 5 years, and a cold chill ran down my spine. So, my gaze went completely cold. You tricked me into getting a divorce, and now you're using my house to keep another man? That's not true. At that, Shen Ji lifted her head sharply, looking deeply offended as she waved her hands in protest. I'm not using your money. I know this isn't fair to you. I feel terrible about it. That's why I walked away with almost nothing. She rushed to explain how noble and self-sacrificing she'd been. Like giving up the money somehow made this betrayal honorable. Besides this house and the money my parents left me, I didn't take a single thing. All the savings, the investments, your car, all our joint marital property, I left it all to you. Listening to her self-congratulatory little speech, I took another deep breath, and the roiling anger in my chest miraculously settled down. I looked at this woman glowing with saintly self-righteousness, and felt like I didn't know her at all. But that didn't matter. I started running the numbers in my head. Shenji Yi came from a well-off family, and her career was successful too. After 5 years, the savings and investments in our joint account were definitely no small sum. The villa had gone up in value, but we'd split the down payment evenly back then. If what she said was true, and she'd walked away with almost everything but the house, then hadn't I just hit the jackpot? I let out a slow breath. So that meant I was a guy on the fast track up his career, about to take over as overseas regional president, suddenly sitting on a small fortune with 0 family obligations tying me down. A prime bachelor. A total catch. When I stayed silent for so long, Shenji assumed I was too devastated to speak. Her eyes red, she bowed her head and apologized through her sobs. Silly, I'm so sorry. Yell at me if you want. Hit me even. I looked at her and smiled softly. It's fine. My tone was gentle, almost reassuring. You had your reasons. We shared a bed for 5 years. How could I not understand? I said all that, but I'd already made up my mind. There was no way I was giving her the limited edition bracelet in my suitcase. It had been a gift for my wife. She was someone else's wife now. Giving her a present would be crossing a line. It was totally out of line. Was I the kind of guy to do something like that? No way. When she heard I wasn't angry, that I actually said I understood, Shenji lifted her head sharply, her eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude. She couldn't hold back any longer. She ran over and threw her arms around me tight, burying her face in my shoulder and breaking down in tears. Just then, the sound of a wheelchair rolling came from the doorway. The caregiver pushed Ju Chung inside. When he saw Shenji clinging to me like that, his face darkened instantly. But he quickly schooled his features into a look of frail, guilty remorse. Mr. Chin, don't blame GI. He spoke in that cloying, victim-playing tone. This is all my fault. I'm the one who's dragging her down. If you're angry, take it out on me. It's not like I'm anything but a useless cripple anyway. I let go of Shenji and turned to look at Ju Cheng in his wheelchair. I wasn't angry at all. In fact, I smiled magnanimously. Mr. Gu, you're being too hard on yourself. I completely understand. I looked down at him from my standing position, my tone so sincere you couldn't fault a single word. After all, you're paralyzed from the waist down. You can't even take care of your own basic needs. If it were me, I wouldn't want to live either. GI has a kind heart. It's only natural she feels sorry for you. Ju Cheng's face went deathly pale. His hands clenched so tight around the armrests his knuckles turned white. A vein bulged on his forehead, but he couldn't get a single word of rebuttal out. After all, it was true, he had no feeling below the waist. That was his excuse for moving in on my ex-wife. And using it to mock him? Fair game. If he so much as opened his mouth to argue, he'd only make himself look worse. I ignored him after that, turning my attention back to Shenji beside me. I don't know why, but watching Ju Cheng sit there helpless in his wheelchair, seething and powerless, and then looking at Shenji, all guilty and remorseful in front of me, a sudden hungry heat coiled low in my stomach. 6 months apart, I'd been craving it. I slipped an arm around Shenji's waist, and right there in front of Ju Cheng, I pulled her toward the bedroom upstairs. Long drought finally met with rain. Over an hour later, the bedroom finally fell quiet. At first, Shenji had bit down hard on her lip, holding back as much noise as she could, mindful of her legal husband downstairs in his wheelchair. But by the end, she couldn't hold back anymore. All reason went out the window and she gave in entirely to instinct. Now, watching her sleep, her cheeks still flushed and streaked with faint tear tracks, I leaned back against the headboard and smiled to myself. Turned out the woman might have terrible judgment, but her body was honest enough. Then again, even if she'd wanted to be unfaithful to him, it's not like he could have done much about it. After all, that Ju Cheng downstairs had no feeling below the waist. He had the desire but not the means. My mind drifted. I couldn't help but think about how we used to be. Shenji and I met not long after college at a party a friend threw. Back then she wore a simple white dress. She was smart, beautiful, with light in her eyes. We'd caught each other's eye across the table, and it was love at first sight, more or less. When the party ended, everyone else hailed cabs and went home, but the two of us stayed behind, unspoken. I suggested getting street barbecue, and she said yes with a smile. That was our second date, kind of. A few beers in, with the early summer breeze blowing around us, we talked about our plans and dreams for the future. Pretty soon we got together just like that. The years after that were nothing but sweet memories. We built our lives together in Sioux City. To save up for the down payment on this villa, we watched every penny. We cooked at home whenever we could, always choosing the cheapest option. On the day we got the keys, we held each other in the empty, unfinished space, giddily planning where the sofa would go, which room would be the nursery. Whenever I worked late into the night, no matter how late it got, she'd always leave a light on and wait for me on the sofa. Back then we'd really truly loved each other. I'd truly built my whole future around her. If none of this had happened, I'd planned to turn down the promotion in London and stay home to be with her. I pulled myself back to the present. By the dim glow of the nightstand lamp, I studied that familiar face again. What a waste, I murmured. I reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek. She was beautiful, that was for sure. Just not very bright. Had to go and play the saint, saving her poor disabled first love and all that self-righteous nonsense. But honestly, it worked out great for me. Since she'd gone ahead and ended our marriage first, I didn't have to feel guilty about staying stuck as some mid-level manager at the domestic branch just for her sake. The regional president position at the London branch? Mine. And for the time I had left before I left handing over work, getting my visa sorted, I didn't mind sticking around this house and enjoying the perks of the old arrangement. After all, their marriage was just a piece of paper. In Shenji's heart, I was still her husband, and I wasn't about to pass up the chance to make that homewrecker squirm. The next morning, it was well past noon by the time Shenji I woke up. She had slept deeper than she had in months. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Chin Seely had always been the one who had her back, who sheltered her from everything. These past 6 months, taking care of a quadriplegic Ju Cheng, had kept her on edge every single day, wearing her down body and soul. It wasn't until last night, wrapped in that familiar steady embrace, that she'd finally, truly relaxed for the first time in half a year. Shenji Yi rubbed her sore lower back, slipped on a robe, and went downstairs. She headed for the kitchen out of habit. But the table was empty. There was none of the breakfast she knew so well. Back in the day, no matter how early Chin Seely left for work, he'd always make her breakfast and keep it warm in the pot. It was a habit he'd picked up back when they'd first graduated and were struggling together. Back in those hardest days. Shenji Yi stared at the cold stove, and a sudden hollow feeling settled in her chest. Ji Yi, you're up. The sound of a wheelchair rolling came from behind her. Ju Cheng wheeled himself slowly closer, carrying a tray. On it were 2 slices of toast and a cup of instant coffee. Mr. Chin left for the office early. I saw it was getting late, so I wheeled myself into the kitchen and made you something simple for breakfast. Ju Cheng looked up at her, a faint understanding smile on his face. Mr. Chin is an important man, he has a lot on his plate. All he thinks about is company performance, and KP is not like me. He sighed self-deprecatingly, his tone thick with that cloying, manipulative sweetness. I'm just a useless cripple. I can't do anything. All I have room for in my head is you. I can barely even make you food without messing it up. I hope it's not too bad. On the surface, he was making excuses for Chin Seely, but every word was a subtle dig, implying Chin Seely only cared about work, and didn't care about her at all. Once, hearing him talk like that, Shenji I would have knelt down and hugged him, telling him not to think that way. But today, for some reason, his little backhanded compliments and digs didn't make her feel touched at all. They just rubbed her the wrong way. She stared at the 2 burnt pieces of toast, and all she could think about, over and over, was the loving breakfast Chin Seely used to make her. Thanks. Just leave it. I'm not hungry yet. Shenji Yi forced a smile and turned to walk out of the kitchen. Ju Cheng sat there in his wheelchair watching her back. That understanding, gentle look in his eyes darkened instantly. At the same time, I was sitting in a bright, spacious conference room, going through the work handover step by step. Finally, I signed my name on the Overseas Regional President appointment letter HR handed me. The transfer to London was official now. No takebacks. To celebrate after work. I treated everyone on the team to dinner, on my own dime. The private room was lively, everyone in high spirits. Mr. Chin, you're amazing. Regional President in your early 30s? That's insane. Don't forget about us when you're in London. Next time we're there on business, we'll definitely be looking to you for help. Amid all the toasting and laughter, a few of the new female grads and pretty young interns gathered around me with sake glasses, chattering excitedly. Mr. Chin, cheers. If you ever need anything from the Home Office while you're in London, just let me know. One sweet-faced intern was blushing, her eyes sparkling as she looked up at me, her shoulder brushing lightly against my suit jacket. Once, as a married man with a family, I would have immediately stepped to the side, put a safe distance between us, and ended the conversation with polite professional small talk. But things were different now. I was divorced. I picked up my glass, and instead of moving away, I leaned back in my chair, relaxed, and clinked glasses with the girls with a smile. Sure thing. Just don't complain when I pile work on you. Watching their cheeks flush with excitement at my response, basking in that easy, uncomplicated admiration and praise, I took a sip of sake and felt a deep, satisfying comfort settle over me. No checking in, no rushing home by a certain time, no compromising or settling for someone else's sake. Single, well-off life? Pretty damn good. By the time dinner ended, it was well past 11 at night. I pushed open the villa door. Only a dim floor lamp was on in the living room. Shen Ji was curled up on the sofa in her pajamas. She stood up the second she heard me come in. Why are you still up? I asked casually, slipping off my shoes. Shen Ji walked over, about to take my coat for me, but she stopped short. She leaned in and sniffed, and that hopeful look in her eyes faded instantly. Her eyes welled up. You smell like another woman's perfume. She bit her lip, her voice thick with hurt and accusation. I paused mid-motion, a cold laugh rising in my chest. Are you kidding me? You secretly filed for divorce while I was stuck abroad on a work trip. And now you've got a paralyzed homewrecker living in my house. Where do you get off asking me about perfume on me like you just caught me cheating? But I wasn't about to pick a fight. After all, the paperwork for London wasn't finished yet. I wanted to keep playing this little game a few days longer. I took off my coat and tossed it casually over the sofa, my tone gentle, almost weary. The boss said I did good work on the London posting, insisted on throwing the whole team a welcome back dinner. These kinds of work events you can't just say no. I walked over and slipped an arm naturally around her waist, pulling her close. Besides, it's not like I go out every night. It's just business. You're not actually taking it seriously, are you? I looked down at her, my voice taking on a meaningful edge. Gee, I've been so understanding about you and Ji Chung. How about you meet me halfway and understand this? The second I mentioned Ju Chang and understanding, all the fire went out of her. A flicker of guilt crossed her eyes. She opened her mouth but in the end said nothing. She just leaned obediently into my arms. Seeing her calm down, I pulled a fancy paper bag I'd picked up at the mall that afternoon and pressed it into her hands. All right, don't be mad. Peace offering. Go put it on, see how it looks. Shen Ji opened the bag, confused. One glance inside and her face went bright red all the way to the tips of her ears. Inside was a set of silk pajamas that barely counted as clothing at all. You're terrible. She swatted playfully at my chest, then glanced nervously toward the guest bedroom down the hall, and lowered her voice. There's someone else in the house. This is too. Are you gonna be good or not? I leaned down and kissed her cheek, my hand tightening slightly at her waist, my tone firm, leaving no room for argument. Shen Ji went weak in the knees at the contact. She pouted, her eyes dark and heavy, muttering something about fine before taking the bag and hurrying red-faced into the bathroom. Not long after, the bathroom door opened, and it was another long, hungry reunion. Maybe Shen Ji was making up for her outburst earlier, or maybe she was chasing some kind of security in this twisted relationship of ours. Either way, She was more eager and compliant than usual tonight. And me? I was just enjoying the last of this, no strings attached. What neither of us knew was that, not long before, Ju Chung had sat in his wheelchair and watched the whole intimate scene unfold in the living room. In the dim light, the muscles in his face twitched violently. His hands gripped the armrest so tight his knuckles went white, his jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. But there was nothing he could do. Because he knew better than anyone he was just a thief stealing what didn't belong to him. He'd gotten that marriage certificate through cheap tricks, playing the victim and guilt-tripping her. What crushed him most was that I didn't even seem angry about him marrying Shen Ji. He'd planned for me to fly off the handle, lose control, and then he'd play the weak, pitiful card, drive a wedge between me and Shen Ji, and claim her for good. But every single one of his schemes landed like a punch to a pillow. Because I just didn't care. And on top of that, I was getting what I wanted every single night. Right then, the useless husband trope became very real. Just not for me. Over the next few days, true to my word, I didn't go anywhere. I stayed home with Shen Ji every day. To her, it was the nicest surprise imaginable. These past 6 months, taking care of Ju Chung had drained every last bit of her patience and energy. Now I was back, and I was willing to put everything behind us and stay with her. She couldn't hide the joy and relief in her eyes. But that warm, cozy scene? To Ju Chung, it was worse than torture. That afternoon, an old movie played on the living room TV. I never bothered hiding anything. I acted like Ju Chung wasn't even there. I pulled Shen Ji openly into my arms, and she curled up on my lap like a docile cat. I peeled grapes and fed them to her every now and then, and we chatted about the plot, close and comfortable. Ju Chung sat in his wheelchair not far away, completely ignored. Watching the wife he'd lied and begged and thrown away his dignity to get, now curled up blushing in another man's arms. His face turned livid, his breathing coming heavier and heavier. Finally he couldn't take it anymore. He coughed loudly, wheeled himself forward, and opened his mouth to speak. Gee, my leg hurts a little. Could you? He never got to finish his little manipulative speech. I spoke first, cutting him off before he could even start. Sister Wang. I called the caregiver over from where she was cleaning, then pulled out my phone. Right there in front of both Shen Ji and Ji Chung, I transferred 2,000 yuan to her. Mr. Chin, what's this? Sister Wang stared at the transfer on her phone, confused. It's such nice weather today. Mr. Ju cooped up inside all the time isn't good for his recovery, physical or mental. My tone was warm, the very picture of a reasonable, caring man looking out for a patient. Take him out for a walk. Go to the park, get some fresh air. Or take him to the hospital for a full checkup. This is for your trouble cab fare, food, whatever. Anything left over is yours to keep. Naturally, I was saying all this for Shen Ji's benefit. I was paying the caregiver to do extra work. Whether Sister Wang actually took him to get checked out, or just dumped him in some random park to bake in the sun all day, I didn't care one bit. Sister Wang was a sharp woman who'd been around the block. One look at that generous transfer and she got the picture immediately. Oh, Mr. Chin, you're too kind. Absolutely right, Mr. Ju does need to get out more. She beamed and walked right over, grabbing the handles of the wheelchair before Ju Chang could protest. Come on, Mr. Gi, let's go. Don't disturb Mr. Chin and the wife's quality time. Ju Chung clung to the armrests, his face red with suppressed rage. He stared at me with venom in his eyes, his lips trembling, but he couldn't get a single word out. What could he say? I was paying out of my own pocket to have someone take him out, get fresh air, look after his health. I'd positioned myself on the moral high ground, left him not a single crack to exploit. If he threw a fit now, he'd just look ungrateful and unreasonable. And to Shen Ji, he'd seem even more impossible. Silly. You're so good to me. Sure enough, Shen Ji looked at me, her eyes full of gratitude and guilt. She thought I'd not only forgiven her but was even willing to spend money to take care of her problem properly. With a loud bang, the front door closed. Ju Chung's furious, helpless, utterly defeated face disappeared from my sight. I leaned back against the sofa and let out a long, satisfied breath. That felt good. Watching that little thief get put in his place fair and square with no way to fight back. I chuckled and tilted Shenji's chin up with my finger. Stop thinking about him, now it's just us. Finally, sure enough, Ju Chung snapped eventually. After days of being humiliated right in front of him, his fragile pride shattered completely. He fell back on his old tricks. Refusing food, yanking out his 4 lines, throwing dramatic fits in the hospital about how he wanted to die. Shen Ji had no choice but to drop everything and rush to the hospital to stay with him around the clock. Lying there in his hospital bed watching her run herself ragged taking care of him. But he was wrong. I couldn't have cared less. While Shen Gi was at the hospital, I had the villa all to myself, and I was having a great time. I'd even pulled out my suitcase and started packing methodically. It was late afternoon on the 4th day when Shen Ji dragged herself home, exhausted. The second she walked into the bedroom she saw the huge, 28-inch suitcase sitting open on the floor, already packed full of my clothes and things. She froze. The tiredness on her face instantly turned to panic. Silly. Why are you packing? Where are you going? I folded the last of my shirts and set them inside. Getting ready for London. Back to work. Shen Ji frowned and stepped forward, grabbing my arm. London? Why didn't you tell me? I paused what I was doing, turned to look at her and hesitated. Didn't I? I made a show of thinking about it, then shrugged casually. Guess I've been too busy with the handover. Forgot. But does it really matter anyway? Of course it matters. Her voice rose sharply, and her eyes welled up with tears, thick with hurt and fear. How long are you going for this time? You said when you got back from this posting we'd start trying for a baby, remember? At the word baby, I almost laughed out loud. I turned to face her directly, looked into those anxious, hopeful eyes and tossed out one simple question, light as air. A baby? Gee, with things the way they are between us, what would the baby call me? One simple question. It hit her like a sledgehammer right in the chest. She went completely still, struck dumb, her mouth open but no sound coming out. Right. She should have thought of this sooner. We were already divorced. She might love me, but legally she was Ju Cheng's wife. Shen Ji stared at me, stared at my calm eyes, stared at my face, which hadn't shown a single flicker of emotion this whole time. And finally she realized something terrible. I really had never been angry. Not once. A man who finds out his wife secretly divorced him, who comes home to find she's moved another man into their house, who watches his wife spend days and nights at the hospital taking care of another man. He never got angry, never demanded answers, never flew off the handle. It wasn't because he had a good temper. It wasn't because he was generous or understanding. It was because he simply didn't care anymore. Shen Ji began to tremble all over. Tears rolled down her face in heavy drops. She stared at me, her voice cracking and broken. Silly, do you not love me anymore? I looked at her, falling apart right in front of me. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it either. I just smiled faintly and reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. What do you think? That night, the house fell into an eerie, suffocating silence. No one said another word. Back in London. This time, my title and my state of mind were entirely different. Regional President. It meant double the workload and far more complicated cross-border business. But I thrived on it. Every day was filled with high-level meetings and negotiations. Watching the resources and power in my hands grow and expand, that kind of tangible reward felt far more solid and reliable than any fleeting emotion. Busy days flew by. Months passed in the blink of an eye. I hadn't asked about anything back home in a long time. Shen Ji Chung, none of it mattered. Everything that happened there felt like some absurd, over-the-top melodrama. And since I'd already walked off the set, why would I care what happened to the 2 actors left behind? With my doubled salary and that small fortune from the divorce, I'd bought myself a rather nice villa. Life was comfortable, steady, pleasant. The only downside? This godforsaken London weather. Barely a sunny day all year round. Always gray, always drizzling on and off. Half the time you barely have time to find shelter before the rain stops again. It's not that relaxed vibe people post about online. It's just, you learn to live with it. One evening as usual. I had a light dinner with an important business partner after work. She was a striking blonde woman, a senior partner at one of the top local law firms, witty, charming, utterly captivating. We said our goodbyes warmly outside the restaurant. I held the car door open for her, a gentleman's hand shielding the top of her head. We exchanged the customary cheek kisses, and I watched her car merge into the busy evening traffic. I'd just turned to head to my own car, when, through the fine mist of rain, my gaze drifted casually across the street. And then I froze. Under the awning of a vintage cafe stood a woman in a thin khaki trench coat. She clutched a worn canvas bag tight in her hands. Strands of her hair were damp from the rain, stuck to her pale cheeks. She looked tired, haggard, a little ragged. And right now, across the busy street, she was staring straight at me. Or rather, staring at the spot where I'd just been laughing and saying goodbye to the blonde woman. It was Shenji. Half a year apart, and she'd lost so much weight. She carried the worn-out exhaustion of someone who'd been beaten down by life. She was unrecognizable from the woman back at the villa in Sioux City, the one who'd stood there glowing with self-righteous saintliness, saying I couldn't just stand by and watch him die. Shenji bit her pale lip, crossed the crosswalk and walked toward me step by step. I brought the shivering half-frozen Shenji back to my villa, and poured her a cup of hot tea. She held the mug sitting by the warm fireplace, and the color slowly returned to her pale face. I settled everything back home. All of it. She looked up at me, her voice still a little hoarse, but her eyes held a desperate do-or-die resolve. Silly, I know I was wrong. She gave a bitter laugh, full of self-mockery. I lost my head for a minute. His mother knelt down in the hospital hallway, and I felt trapped. I thought I was saving a life. I thought it was some great noble sacrifice. But after you left, I finally saw the truth. Ju Chung isn't some poor victim who needs saving. He's a paranoid, sensitive, controlling leech. And his mother? She treated me like a free-living nurse and a personal ATM. Shenji took a deep breath, her gaze hardening. So I didn't let them get away with it. Listening to her speak, I leaned back in the armchair and raised an eyebrow, non-committal. She really was the woman who'd fought her way to the top in business. Strip away that ridiculous saint complex, and she could be ruthless when she wanted to be. So, I looked at her, my tone even. You flew all the way to London just to tell me how tough you are. Shenji set down her teacup. From that worn canvas bag she pulled out a thick file folder and held it out to me with both hands. This is everything I got from selling all my assets back home, plus my investment returns from these past months. I moved it all into an overseas account. She looked at me, her eyes glistening, her voice humble, almost pleading. Silly, if you'll just forgive me, let me stay by your side. It's all yours. From now on, I'll do whatever you say. I'd really had no intention of getting dragged back into her messy life. After all, I was single, rich, free, and living pretty damn well. But when I idly opened the file and glanced at the asset breakdown and account balance, I went quiet. I had to admit it. Shenji really was one hell of an investor. It was true she'd left all the savings and investments to me, walked away with almost nothing. But with the money from selling the villa and what her parents had left her, in barely half a year, she'd ridden a few market waves perfectly, and multiplied her capital who knew how many times over. She was rich again. That much was very real. I stared at the long string of zeros, my mind working fast. Rich, obedient, beautiful, burdened with crippling guilt. Someone who required zero emotional labor from me, who would even bring money to the table. This deal sounded like a win no matter how you looked at it. Exactly my type, no adjustments needed. I tossed the file folder casually onto the coffee table, leaned forward slightly and looked at her. Remarriage is absolutely out of the question. My tone was cold, laying out the hard truth up front. After all, you betrayed me. You took advantage of my trust and secretly got a divorce. Something like that? There's no moving past it for me. Hearing that I wasn't just kicking her out, Shenji's eyes lit up instantly. I'm not in a hurry. She shook her head quickly, her eyes shining with the relief of getting something back she'd thought lost forever. No, remarriage is fine. I don't have to be your wife. I can be your lover, your business partner, even just someone you see in secret. Anything. Silly, I can court you all over again. However long it takes. With that, she stood up, walked over to me and sank down to sit at my knees. Like a stray cat that had finally found shelter, she curled up docilely in my arms. I leaned back against the sofa, feeling the warmth of her in my arms. My gaze drifted to the window, to the fine drizzling London night rain outside. The corner of my mouth tugged upward in a faint smile. This God-forsaken weather? It didn't seem quite so terrible after all. This story warns us that blind compassion and lingering nostalgia will ruin a happy life. Out of old affection for her first love, the heroine secretly divorced her husband without telling him while H.E. worked abroad and took her disabled ex into their marital home to take care of him, thinking she was noble. In fact, she completely betrayed her marriage. After seeing through everything, the hero let go of his feelings calmly, seized the opportunity to become an overseas senior manager, and watched them wear each other down. The first love was selfish and manipulative, relying on pity to take everything. Though the heroine realized her mistake and gave all her assets to win him back, the rift between them could never be fixed. It teaches us kindness needs boundaries and loyalty is the foundation of love. Unprincipled softness only traps you in trouble. Let go of wrong people and obsessions, and you can embrace a bright new life.